All right, welcome everybody. It's Chris Petri. Thanks so much for coming by, and I'm happy you're here. And we're going to create a great watercolor, ink and wash watercolor today. It's going to be a really interesting winter scene. We're looking at it right now. It's just got that real beautiful winter scene feel to it with the snow and the mountains, and it's like a beautiful out in the country type of scene, maybe a farm. That looks like a farm. Actually, it definitely is a farm. I see some silos in that picture, and looks like a barn on the right hand side. There's a really cool vertical tree here in the foreground, which is going to make it a nice feel of three-dimensionality and distance in our painting. So we're incorporating that tree trunk here. That's going to look really good, and the beautiful red colors in here. So there's going to be a lot of really fun things to work on here. I also noticed there's some really cool, really dark mountains, some really mysterious dark, maybe evergreen trees or pine trees off in the distance here, and like kind of a wintry sky. So we're going to recreate this, and we'll use ink and wash as well. So we'll use the ink along all these darks here. We're going to use some of the inks for some of the darks on this barn and house here, windows, some of these shrubs here, maybe over here on this barn area. So let's get right into it. We'll just do it step by step and work right through it. We'll take breaks. This way we can kind of relax a little bit in between our progressions going through our painting here. And we'll see what happens. I'm sure it's going to turn out really good. This is fun too. It's more of a simple color scheme. You can kind of see that it's a very subdued color scheme. Mostly, it's definitely a warm painting with the reds and the golden colors, the siennas, some of the browns and raw umbers in the sky and in the tree here. So this is definitely a really kind of a nice feel of winter, yet it's kind of a warm feel to it. So I think it's really going to work nicely. Let's get into it. I'm going to take this and we'll move this over across on the art table here. So I'm going to set that across from me, and we'll set up our camera here. Okay, that looks good. And we'll get started here. We're going to usually, I know many of you have been following for quite a while. Just to put this out, if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. We're making videos every weekend here, once a week, and we're creating all different styles of watercolor paintings, ink and wash paintings, various different subject matter, all types of subject matter. So if you want to keep up and follow along, it's just a simple hitting the subscribe button. You hit the subscribe bell. Also, it'll alert you when the video comes out. So on the weekend, you'll be notified exactly when the video is out onto YouTube, and you'll be able to watch and work along with us. And I'm also just started a new YouTube channel. It's called Watercolor in 5, with the number 5. I think I have, it's basically just a simple site, watercolor in 5. And I'm going to make that channel 5-10-minute videos, and I'm just going to put out all kinds of interesting information on there that I can't get to when we're doing these videos. A lot of times you notice we're really creating paintings on this channel, my main channel, Chris Petri channel. So the new channel I have is just going to be for beginners, intermediate, even people that have been painting a long time. If you've been painting a long time or you're brand new, there might be some tidbits of information, little interesting factoids here and there on that channel that you might be able to use. And again, I'm going to keep the videos very short, maybe 5-10 minutes at most. Sometimes I've already made a few videos, so there's a couple that went over the 5-minute rule. I'm trying to keep to a 5 or 10 minute at most for those videos. But I thought that would be interesting because a lot of times I'd like to share more information with everyone, but when we're doing these type of videos, I can't just keep interjecting things that are not really maybe directly related to what we're doing here, if that makes sense. So you as an artist, you know, you have to decide if you're going to take advantage of that website, that YouTube channel that I have, Watercolor in 5. I think it's good. It's worth it. And I'll probably put out videos randomly on that, so it's not going to be a, like maybe I might try to put a video out maybe once a week on that channel. Sometimes if I don't get to it, I'm not going to worry about it. It's more of just a fun channel that I'm going to have, you know, just to do some interesting things on. Okay, so let's get into this painting, and we're going to do our due diligence by setting up our paper here. So when we looked at the painting, it was somewhat simplistic as far as its overall layout. It's really, the subject matter is really located in the bottom left side of the painting. So if we're looking at the painting, the painting mostly is the barns and the house are like over here in this. So if we broke it down into 4 squares, most of the interesting information's like here, and then we have the tree here, and then we have the hills, distant hills over here. So most of our work is going to be right here, the more intricate work. You can simplify this over here if you wanted to. You could maybe make it just one building. And I always say that as an artist, you know, you have freedom to change around things in any way that you want to make it easier for you to accomplish a painting or a composition. Or if you're out in plein air painting outdoors and you want to shift around some things in your painting, even though it might be one way when you're looking at it, even the same thing if you're working from a workbook or a painting, I always say, take artist liberty, change some things around if you have to make it easier. So if it's easier just to make maybe one simple barn over here, if you're sort of not sure if you want to get involved with a whole lot of drawing in this painting, you can make it more simple and just maybe do one barn type structure here, and then, you know, finish the rest of the painting out. I'm going to try to do pretty much most of what I'm seeing in the painting, and I am working in a small format here, so it might be a little easier working in a smaller format. So let's keep going here. We kind of understand like our basic layout now, so I'll just make that kind of that square in the corner over here. That's our mostly where our information, our subject matter is going to be. It goes outside of that a little bit, but for the most part. So I'm going to do that, and then just a very light sketch. And I didn't think I had to really do too many notes over here as far as on our tape section. We could do a couple markings just to help ourselves as we go. We could say over here is the trees, so we could make a little note there on our paper as we go. Now this sometimes helps when we're doing a painting or a composition, if we can make little notes around the edges on the tape. So this way when we're drawing and working on the drawing portion, which we're doing now, we already have some things kind of figured out already, so it's not going to kind of hit us all at one time where we're worried about where everything is. So I'm putting trees up here too. So I'm just looking about where the trees go to about here, the tree line on those distant hills. And then the tree is the tree trunk that goes right through the painting here in the foreground. That's about there. And then I'm looking at that distant barn. That's about over here behind the tree. And I'll shift things around a little bit. And it's about a third. So we could say this is a third, 1/3, and 1/3 approximately of a division here. This third here is the, I'll call that the I'm going to call that the, I'm just going to say that's like a fence over there. It looks like a fence in the distance in the picture that runs along the back of the flat area where the buildings are, the farmhouse and the barns and things. Okay. Great, so we have some markings on here. Just so as we start our drawing now, we have some helpful markings on our paper here. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to do contour drawing, which is just basically starting in one place. And even before I do contour drawing, let me just do a real light preliminary sketch just to get the scale of things. There's a lot of information here. So let me do that. I'm going to lightly sketch some things in. There's a tree here. So I just want to get that in. That's about there. Okay, then we see the first house here, the first portion of the house, and that's about there. Roof coming this way. Doesn't have to be perfect. I might be going a little bit large here. If you kind of can see that, my scale is starting to get a little bit large there. So scale's important. I'm trying to keep everything in the distance. This we're looking from a far distance down onto this area here, so we might be on like a mountaintop looking down into sort of like a valley where this is. So we have to keep that in mind, that it's going to look more in the distance, and so I'm just going to try to do the best I can to get these roofs in here. And again, if it's if you want to just do one more simple building here on this type of painting, you can do that. You can take a picture from another painting or drawing, or something you've done before, or a photograph online, and then you could scale it down and make it smaller to fit into the picture, the scale of the picture. That would work. I've done that many times. I'm not going to get too detailed here. I just want to get the basic ideas here, and then this is just patience. If you start this, you know this might be a time for a break. Sometimes trying to draw things like this where there's a lot of angles and different things, and sometimes it's helpful to take a break. I'm going to keep pressing on here. I feel like it also would be helpful. It would be helpful too if I maybe would have drawn this a couple times, maybe sketched it out on a piece of paper first. That sometimes makes things a little easier. And I wouldn't worry if things don't line up exactly when you start looking at things and they're not lining up perfectly. No big deal. So I'm contour drawing what I see. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not making sure everything is perfect. and then I look over here and I use this point of this peak of this roof to find the other roof line, which is over here, and it goes across. And that's a smaller shape there. It's basically a rectangle. This probably is a painting that would be better a little larger. I'm trying to make this into a postcard, actually, or a Happy New Year's card. So this is actually a card-sized painting that'll fit on a card, and then I can just put it in my printer and print copies of it for some cards. So I'm sort of doing two things at one time here. And I'm noticing that that line is about right where we have it, the fence line, I called it. That's sort of like the edge of the property back here. And then there's, again, we might shift things around. I'm going to we'll do the tree here, the tree trunk. And we'll just put it in like that, and then we'll put a few markings of where we're going to go with. Once we start painting, we'll put some of those branches on. And over here, so we can make this, again, I'm shifting things a little bit, making it a little different than what we originally saw. And we'll do this. I see a little bit of a branch there somewhere, and that looks pretty good. And we'll do the chimney over here. Okay, that's pretty good. I would take a break, but I'm going to keep, again, trying to... Let's finish up this drawing here. We got that. We're going to put in some of the details. A couple of the windows here. There's a dormer there. And a little shadow there. There's some snow on these. Some of these, well, the roofs have snow on them, so that's just an interesting thing to keep in mind. And once we start painting this, it'll be a lot more fun. This is more the... So now I'm just going to get the feel for those distant hills here. And then these over here start like that and go up like this. And then we have like a road or something there. And then more snow and snowy fields over here. And I'll do a little dark shading just to help me, so that when we go in to paint this with the black ink, we'll make sure we shade in the areas that that we need to. And I'm not going to be as detailed as the original. I'm going to keep it a little more simple. Just want to make sure there's some darks. And we've taken a break. It's good to take breaks, relax a little bit. Now we're feel a little more refreshed. We're going to come back. We're going to do our ink now. We're going to put in our ink portion of our painting. So I'm using Speedball brand Super Black India ink. Great. This is the best I've found yet. Doesn't bleed or anything like that. Once it's dry, perfect. Doesn't smudge, smear, anything like that. This I think is one of the top ones on YouTube. If you do any researches, research on the best inks to use for watercolor ink and wash, you'll find that a lot of artists recommend this. So that's kind of how I found out about it. And so I wanted to mention that I'm going to use a small container like this for my ink. And the key to this is, for us, we're doing a smaller composition like this, so we're going to want to use just a little bit of ink in the bottom of this. And I would actually do this over a piece of paper. I'm daring fate here by doing it over the painting. Okay, so I'm just going to put in about maybe a 1/4 inch of ink in the bottom of this inkwell. The reason why is when we dip our pen into this ink, if we put too much ink in this well, ink in the well, that means that when we use our bamboo pen, too much ink is going to be coated onto the tip of this bamboo pen, and then when we go and rest it down on the paper, it's going to leak out and make large bubbles of and puddles of black ink. So we want to try to keep the black ink very minimal. So that's why we put just a little tiny bit of ink in the inkwell here that we have. So you can even just put even less than that. Maybe just to cover the bottom of the inkwell is probably enough to do this painting here. Plenty. So we will continue here. Also, I will do some touch-ups once we're done at the very end, after all the watercolor paint has dried as well as the ink. I will use some Sharpie pens, very fine point Sharpie pens. Also, I have Faber-Castell pens. It's called a Pitt Artist Pen by Faber-Castell. It's permanent, waterproof, and I'll use it to make little small marks for trees and things like that, and little details. If I don't capture everything with my ink the first wash of ink. Okay, so we're back from our break. We just had a little break to relax, and I got myself some coffee and a bite to eat, and I'm right now. I'm just going to look at this painting and say, what colors do I see? That I'm going to use to paint this. It's not a lot, really. When you look at this, it's sort of warm colors. So I see like raw umber here, yellow ochre, raw umber. This might be a mixture. Let's just say we can use a mixture of our reds that we normally use, burnt sienna, cadmium red, a little bit of cadmium orange, raw sienna. This is some burnt umber here on this section, and some more raw umber and yellow ochre here. So it's sort of a mix here. Alizarin crimson, alizarin crimson over here too, alizarin crimson over here, cad red, maybe some burnt sienna, and then for these areas here, it's kind of maybe a cerulean blue mixed with some raw umber, cadmium red under here. Here we have a little more yellow, so there's some greenish yellow here. So we can have fun with this. We can mix a lot of colors within a more simple color scheme, though. So we're really going to be sticking with reds and the warmer earth tone colors, and that should be fine. And then we can mix in a little bit of cerulean blue or cobalt blue to get some of the cooler, maybe tonal values over here in this section here, and maybe in some of this shadow areas of the snow. But we're going to keep it real simple. So we'll start our painting with our watercolors. And I set my painting across from me. And I just get some fresh, clean water. So I'm just going to use a small water bucket. A little bit of water in there. I'll have a tissue on hand just to dry off my brush a little bit here and there. And I'm going to use a number 6 brush. So this is a Da Vinci travel brush, natural hairs, Kolinsky sable hairs. And let's start out. Maybe we'll start at the top and we'll stick to the colors we see. I'm going to go with raw umber and a little bit of raw umber and a little bit of cerulean blue. And I'm just going to wash that in a little bit. It's going to be definitely lighter, so I don't want to go too light. I want to sort of get that to watercolor paint always dries lighter. And I just put a little bit of cerulean blue in there just to give it a little bit of a variation. And again, I'm going to keep this color simple. So really all the hard work's done now. We're just going to be washing in our color here a little bit. I'm going to try to leave a lot of white snow. But I will put some color on there. And maybe a little bit of cadmium orange. Just a ever so slight cadmium orange. Just to have a little wash on that snow. Then a touch of cerulean blue just to have for some variety. Okay, now I'm going to work on some of the, so there's some burnt umber there and some burnt sienna. On this side of the barn. And then some of that same mixture over here. And a little bit of cobalt blue I see there. And then we're going to work in some cadmium red, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna. A little bit of the darker tonal values there on this side, maybe. Then we're just going to rinse off the brush, tap off some of the water, and then just lightly bring over some of that color. Pick up some color too as well off the palette. And that's sort of a hard line there, like a square edge. So I'm going to try to lift up with some tissue, and that looks pretty good. And then raw umber and burnt umber. So I'm just working around my palette here with some colors. Since it isn't a large painting, it's a little easier to mix up some colors here and there on the palette. And we're mixing some raw umber and yellow ochre. And then just a lighter mixture of the same over here on the face of this house. And I might be able to use a little bit of titanium white to put a few highlights in over here. It's a little darker here, so I'll use some of those darks there. So this is quite dark, but not like the real ink, and not the ink dark, but dark. You know, it's burnt umber and a little bit of cobalt blue, maybe some French ultramarine blue. So we'll try to capture some of the darks, but we'll try to really capture it as we see it in the picture. So there's some areas that are not quite the darkest dark like with the ink, but and some more raw umber over here. And some more raw umber. A little burnt umber and raw umber. A little bit of blue in there, cerulean blue. I rinse my brush, dry off my brush a little. So here's some of the snow's melted on the roof. And if you see an angle that might have went off a little bit. And we'll do the chimney over here. There's another chimney here. And maybe a little bit of shadowing on the roofs. It's more of a bluish shadow. That's actually roof, like this is actually the roof, and then the snow has melted. And then there's some shadowing on the roof here. And again, we can touch up and add some. We can add some more touch-ups to the painting with some black marker or even some more ink. Raw umber, French ultramarine blue. Okay, now I'm going to do some of this I might use my fine line brush here, needlepoint brush. So I'll use my needlepoint brush, which has got a little more fine line. And I'll mix the colors of the branches from the raw umber and the cerulean blue. some more here. So here we're doing pretty good. We're actually, this is pretty much finishing up. We're just getting those last bit of details. We have to finish this this tree trunk here, the main tree trunk of this tree in the foreground. We'll do that. And we'll scrub in a little bit of color here for this tree that we see. Just like in the painting, we're just going to give it a little, with the side of the brush, with a little bit of paint, not too much paint, not too much water, just a little bit. Just to have a bit of that feeling of some leaves, very little leaves, a little bit of splashing maybe. And we'll do this tree trunk here. So here, a good way to approach this is cerulean blue, raw umber, cerulean blue, raw umber, yellow ochre, and we just mix all those three. We don't homogenize them. We just keep them identifiable, the colors. Raw umber, yellow ochre, cerulean blue, and then maybe, oh, that should be good. We'll keep the same repeating colors throughout the painting, and then we'll just do that. Just a nice, add some color, some variety to that. We can do, there's like a shadow there, so we can do that there. And then there's some red here. And that looks good. It kind of balances the colors because of the red barn and house over there. And we'll put a little bit of orange. A little bit of cadmium yellow. So I'm adding a little bit of cadmium yellow just to the other mixture. Okay, that looks pretty good. Burnt umber, French ultramarine blue, raw umber. Just going to make some markings on a tree here a little more, just to give it some. That seems to be the shadow side of the tree. There's not really an identifiable bright light in this painting. It's more of an overcast day, so, but it does look like there's more of a shadow on this side. Looking at the painting, and we'll do some more. Just some and then toward the foreground here, I'll do a little splashing, a couple splashes of paint, just to give it a little bit of interesting look. And I notice we need to maybe add a little bit more raw umber, cerulean blue. Maybe across there a little bit. I'm just going to do a little touch up. Maybe add a little few darks here and there. And what I think is good about this is if we use this needlepoint brush too as well, it kind of is really close, like as far as like using a bamboo pen and ink. It sort of has that feel to it also. It has like the fine, very fine feel, the lines that we can do with the needlepoint brush, which is good. And we have some and maybe just a little more blue, cerulean blue. So I just put a real light wash of cerulean blue here, just to kind of have a feel of like a hill there.